the simplest way to think about Bitcoin is that it's gaining traction as replacement for gold. I think that if someone wanted to understand the use case for Bitcoin, and there's many, but they're not too, they don't have a lot of conviction around something, to me, I could say easily it should supplant gold. And so I think Bitcoin should be, over $1 million over time. And then I kind of prescribing to the view that there's probably a chance that maybe the 4-year cycle is ending for Bitcoin because of the way institutional adoption of that thesis is taking place. And so you have institutional and essentially permanent holders of Bitcoin coming in. So it should be good. I mean, so I think Bitcoin should really build upon this 120 before the end of the year. So, 200,000, maybe 250. You
think by the end of the year?
Yeah.
I would love to get your take on the corporate Bitcoin treasuries because we're seeing so many more emerge. Some people are a little nervous and they don't think that all of them can survive or that it might create some sort of a bubble similar to the .com era. And others are extremely bullish on literally all of them. So where are you at?
Well, you can't create a bubble because you're buying Bitcoin. So unless you think Bitcoin's a bubble, it's not a bubble, right? I think the crypto treasuries there's going to be winners and losers because there is a scarcity to it, actually. So Bitcoin is scarce, and so it's proper for companies to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet over time. And I think banks will, because banks, as Bitcoin really does get recognized in its proper place as how you move money in the financial system, then the banking sector will actually stake Bitcoin as well. They're going to want to own it, I mean. And so these treasuries are doing what other businesses will eventually do. But for them to get a premium to their Bitcoin because of how they're executing a strategy, that is the scarce part. MicroStrategy has already proven that their strategy works because they started in August 12th, 2020. They bought 260 million Bitcoin. Stock was $13. Now they own close to 5% of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
And they announced a huge buy last week, but the stock is 400. It's gone up 30 times. So that's truly executed in a masterful way. I don't know if the 50 other Bitcoin treasury companies I don't know how many are. I actually looked at that website.
BitcoinTreasuries.net.
Yeah, and there's like 50 companies. Not all of them are doing treasury strategies.
Right.
But I think a handful will emerge as winners, but not everyone.
Are you bullish on some over others? Like, can you name any?
Well, I would say, again, I don't necessarily want to necessarily recommend one or the other, except for one that's in our granny shots. But I'd say that there's been differentiation, like there's a geographic differentiation. So in Japan, there aren't ETFs. So Metaplanet's been amazing, and in the UK, there's a handful of names. And then there's one just emerged in Korea. So is a geographically diverse thing. They have an opportunity to distinguish themselves. But because of like what I've seen in treasuries, there is a certain like alchemy that like MicroStrategy has, which is MicroStrategy has made MicroStrategy shareholders into customers. I mean, he has orange pilled every shareholder of MicroStrategy, and he has maintained a premium, and he has transformed capital markets. That is what needs to be done for these other treasuries to be successful. And not everyone probably has that combination.
And which one's in your granny shot? I think I know.
Yeah, Semler Scientific is.
In full disclosure, I'm on the board. Why did you choose that one in particular?
Well, I like what Eric's doing. So he's taking a slightly different approach, and you need to give it time to work, which is he wants to say, I want Bitcoin as a treasury strategy, and I'm going to use capital markets to stack my Bitcoin, my sats. But he also wants to have a profitable operation that can fund the cash flow into building more Bitcoin. Now, at the moment, some shareholders are like, that's not the MicroStrategy. I want pure Bitcoin treasury. But that's not Eric's approach. I like Eric's approach. So, we just want to give it time, and he's brought some folks on board, including you, to really help amplify his message. So, for us as a mid granny shot, it's in our SMID cap research portfolio. Look, we don't think you can go wrong, because Bitcoin's 120,000. You're buying $120,000 Bitcoin in Semler, and he's acquiring more Bitcoin all the time. And if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, then Semler Scientific is gonna go up proportionally. So,
do you have a take on the preferreds that Strategy has issued?
Michael Saylor's view is that Bitcoin's going to compound at a rate that justifies any relative level of liability that normally would be tough to stomach, and so that's why he's created these structures. But they've been enormously successful products, and of course, he could change and refinance them at any time. So I think the main thing is Michael Saylor is changing the reality of the stock market. And the reason is that he probably will end up being potentially the largest company in the stock market, okay? Especially if Bitcoin goes to $1 million. Yet he doesn't generate GAAP net income to justify it. He's based solely on the value of his balance sheet. And but that's not new to history, because when I graduated college, the biggest stock in the S&P, a top 5 name, was ExxonMobil. And it was top 5 for 28 years, 30 years, like an entire generation. Graduated, worked on Wall Street. A top 5 name was a company that was only valued on the value of its oil, not on its net income. So like MicroStrategy is like replacing Exxon in lore, because for a whole generation people said Exxon was the biggest company, but you don't value it on earnings. Well, MicroStrategy could be one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's valued on its Bitcoin.
Well, have you heard some people said that President Trump said that Bitcoin is the new oil? Have you heard that?
I did. And if it's a strategic asset, yeah, because what he's probably referring to is that the countries that have oil have strategic power in a way that everyone else doesn't, right? I mean, think about Japan and Germany versus the US or the Middle East or Russia. US, Middle East, Russia produce and export power, which powers everything that everyone needs, and for cars, etc. And so if President Trump is saying Bitcoin is the strategic asset, he is correct. I agree. But I do think that means the U.S. needs to, of course, have a strategic reserve. Right.
And we haven't seen that yet. I just thought of something. I think I heard you on a show being asked about how the United States might acquire Bitcoin. And going out into the market, I mean, that would definitely move the price. So didn't you say something about the possibility that the government would actually instead try to, let's say, buy a company that has a lot of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that makes a lot of sense. I think the day the U.S. says they want to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin's price is going to go up parabolically.
Right.
Because how is the U.S. going to buy it? I mean, they can't, if you know their wallet, you're going to see every buy, and it's going to become a national pastime for everybody because they're a long buyer. I think it's going to be easier for them to buy large holders of Bitcoin. Maybe even give tax amnesty, right? That's why they're saying it's tax-free. We won't tax capital gains. They'll do everything they can to try to acquire Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Maybe, but MicroStrategy has a sovereign put. They have 600,000 Bitcoin. That's the easiest way to get to 1 million Bitcoin. Well, the U.S. has a history of acquiring and paying for strategically important things.
Mm-hmm. They just did so with the rare earths. I mean, the Pentagon deal with MP, I feel like it's not nationalizing it, but it's a strategic move.
Yeah, I think the U.S. government takes a private sector approach to that. So if MicroStrategy is at 400 and the clearing price to do that deal is 3,000 or something, it's probably cheaper to do that than to try to buy 1 million Bitcoin.
What do you think Michael Saylor's reaction to that would be?
I'm not Michael Saylor, but I know that his personal holdings of Bitcoin he'll never sell, right? And he'll let them essentially become, he'll help permanently help Bitcoin's legacy because he'll just let the keys expire with him. But for MicroStrategy shareholders, he might have a different view because at the end of the day, he'll probably weigh where he can get MicroStrategy versus someone making a hostile takeover bid. I mean, it's just hypothetical. So,
well, I mean, is this like your base case? Do you think that the government will acquire Bitcoin by just acquiring one of these companies?
If I had to war game that, there's 600,000 Bitcoin in MicroStrategy.
Yeah, on the way to more. Gosh, that's so fascinating. I have so many questions. Okay, well, let's take this in another direction.
Can you imagine the U.S. like on Coinbase trying to hit the buy button? Right. I mean, like, what's going to happen? Like,
exactly. Well, I wanted to ask you because you're always tweeting about, Bitcoin is the way. You're super bullish on Bitcoin, but then you're also tweeting that you think Ethereum is the best macro trade of the decade, and you're building an Ethereum treasury company. I personally don't understand it. And even Michael Saylor, I think, has said recently that he doesn't see a compelling reason to do so with any other digital asset but Bitcoin. So can you explain your point of view on this?
Yes. I don't see this as a conflict. It's the same reason why someone who says they like Tesla but they like Palantir, because they're both scarce stocks, right? Like there's one Tesla because there's only one Elon Musk in the world. And there's only one Palantir because while it's not completely clear exactly how Palantir transforms companies, you can see whether it's a hospital in Michigan or wherever, they are really providing superhuman powers to a business. So, you should own both. Bitcoin to me is a proven blockchain that in my mind is storing value, and it is it's like Michael Saylor says, it's immaculate. And I do think the simplest way to think of it is it's replacing gold. So at least let's get to 1 million, and then we can see how much further Bitcoin goes. But the world is also grappling with the digitalization of everything that we do. And so we're storing information, and we're tokenizing businesses, and we're tokenizing the dollar. And stablecoins have become so important, in fact, from a policy perspective, because stablecoins are now actually big buyers of treasuries collectively. I mean, that's why you may say you don't have to worry about deficits because stablecoins will buy the debt. Well, that is the ChatGPT moment for crypto, because what's happened is that the first killer app for crypto has emerged that is now seeing widespread adoption, which is stablecoins. And now Wall Street is running to tokenize and maybe even financialize their entire system on the blockchain. But that means they require smart contracts. So they're not fighting with Bitcoin. Bitcoin paved the way for Wall Street to recognize that you don't have to have tangible assets to create value. But if you're going to tokenize what Wall Street does, and you tokenize stocks and real estate, you need smart contracts. And the biggest and most secure blockchain with no downtime is Ethereum. And it's legally compliant, and the majority of stablecoins and real-world assets that have been tokenized are taking place on Ethereum.
So if you had to put all your money into one, though, over the next 10 years, would you choose Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Well, if I had to choose, because I'm chairman of BitMine, which is an Ethereum treasury, then I, of course, would choose Ethereum. In my 30 years of investment history, investing experience, I've never been told to have only one choice.
Okay.
And I've never seen anyone make a good decision based on one choice. Just, all
right, fair enough. One thing I do believe in is free markets. Let's see what happens over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share that people should really be paying attention to, that you've been watching closely, or that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that you may have listeners that are kind of curious about Bitcoin, but they have to also appreciate that every generation, like we're talking about generation alpha now, they are native. They're born native, and they're also going to be born in a world of AI. And so this idea of like physical money and only physical things represent value is not going to exist. So I think that's why Bitcoin's future, the best years are still ahead for crypto, Bitcoin, obviously, and Ethereum. Not everyone will agree on Ethereum, but because we have another generation of people and decision makers that are really growing up as in a world of where AI is prevalent in their lives, and then really a token economy. So I think the best years are still ahead.